This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
Thank you to the disembodied voice of Jonathan Keller. Hey, is Fresno Unified School District taking your teenager out of school to get Plan B, abortifacient, contraception, and all kinds of things? We're going to get the answer to that right now on Right to Life Radio, a production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. I am John Girardi. I am the director of Right to Life of Central California. Thank you all so much for tuning in. For those of you who are regular Power Talk listeners, you may recognize my voice from the John Girardi Show, Monday through Friday from 6 to 7 p.m., yeah, that's me. They gave me a Monday through Friday show in addition to this Saturday gig, so you can get your John Girardi fix 6 days a week. I want to talk about this story that's been bopping around in the Fresno Bee. I like doing as local stories as I possibly can that have to do with the topics of respect for human dignity and human life. You can, to a certain extent, you can get national stories almost anywhere. You can get California stories in very few places, and you can get local stories in almost no places. So I want to talk about a local story that has to do with the topic of abortion that was in the Fresno Bee this week. Jonathan Keller not joining us this week, by the way. Just schedules didn't work out for this week, so he should be back next week. This is a story from the Wednesday edition of the Fresno Bee. And I read through the Fresno Bee for both this show and for general Right to Life purposes, if there's something terrible that I need to respond to, and for prepping for my daily show. So this is, relatively speaking, buried on page 4A of the Wednesday edition of the Bee. A grand total of 5 people must have read this, which includes the author, the editor, and the author's mom. So here's the story. School trustee questions teen birth control service. It's pricked my eyes up. The story goes, a community transportation service that helps teens get sexual and reproductive health services. Warning, warning, warning. Reproductive health services often just means abortion. Warning, warning, warning. A community transportation service that helps teens get sexual and reproductive health services has recently come into question by Fresno Unified trustee Terry Sladek. Sladek has brought up the issue at several board meetings, saying several of his constituents from the Bullard High area have come to him worried about their children being transported by non-FUSD staff off campus to receive health services. Sladek says he worries about district liability and the fact that students do not have parental permission to leave campus during school hours. Sladek said he doesn't have a problem with students getting reproductive health services. Well, I sure do. But said it's a problem that parents have not given permission for their children to travel off campus. It's not a birth control problem, he told the Bee. It's who's driving my daughter around town. Fresno Unified officials say, although students are taught how to access clinic resources and sexual health classes, the school is not involved with the transportation service, and state laws allow students to leave for medical purposes without a parent's permission. Now, here's where we get into this. The section of the article is sort of sub-entitled, State Laws Let Minors Check Themselves Out. According to California minor consent laws, beginning at age 12, kids have the right to check themselves out of school for reproductive health appointments, and the school cannot notify or obtain permission from parents. Let me read that again. According to California minor consent laws, beginning at age 12, kids have the right to check themselves out of school for reproductive health appointments, and the school cannot notify or obtain permission from parents. In case you are unsure about what reproductive health appointments means, let me make no bones about it and just dispel any question you might have. Reproductive health appointments include abortions. It includes surgical abortion appointments. All right. Reproductive health in California is explicitly, constantly, throughout multiple sections of California law, multiple statutes that have been passed for years and years and years. Reproductive health includes abortion. All right. So in case you're wondering about this, Because the Fresno Bee article is certainly not clarifying this. At no point in this article is the word abortion mentioned once. Even though I'm sure for everyone reading this, it's like literally the first thing at the top of their mind. Well, reproductive health services, does that just mean like condoms and stuff? Like, certainly that doesn't mean abortion, does it? No, it 100% means abortion. So beginning at age 12 in California, a kid can check herself out of school and the school to go have an abortion, and the school cannot tell anyone about it. Now, let's dig into this more. We've gotten well into the article. We still don't know who the entity is that's driving these kids to school. Let's learn about it. The transportation service in question is provided not by an FUSD employee. It is provided by the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, FEOC. Some of you may have heard of this entity before, which offers free transportation to people ages 12 to 19 who request services from the EOC downtown clinic on R and Tulare Streets. Fresno Unified spokeswoman Amy Idzvug said students arrange their own appointments with the clinic. School and district staff are not involved, therefore there is no liability to the school. Oh, well, as long as the school's not liable. I guess that's the most important thing, not whether or not a 12-year-old is getting a ride during school hours. It's not told to the parents. It's not reported. And they're going to get, quote, reproductive health services, and we're about to learn what those services are. As part of sexual health education courses, students are taught about accessing community resources and preventing pregnancy, Idzvug said. But the teachers do not sign up the students for appointments or check them out of school. Idzvug says, by law, they can check themselves out from school for a confidential medical appointment, she said. Nazreen Johnson, a spokeswoman with the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, Fresno EOC, or is it Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, yeah, said about 100 students per month countywide take advantage of the transportation service, known as the Health Education and Recruitment Transportation Team, HEART with 2 T's. Nothing I hate more than an acronym that is artificially created just to spell out a word. Well, I guess the only thing I hate more than that is taking 12-year-olds without their parents' knowledge or permission to get reproductive health services. Anyway, a pair of staffers, one male and one female, pick up and drop off the students at their schools. They have badges for identification purposes. Students can access free birth control, pregnancy testing, HIV and STD testing. Let me read through that list again. Students can access free birth control, pregnancy testing, HIV and STD testing, and reproductive health services. Said I, upon reading this article, John Girardi, reading this article. I wonder what "and reproductive health services" means. I wonder how much work that phrase is doing. I wonder how much is packed into that little snippet. So I did a little bit of research. I looked up, I went to the website of the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, which I would think for most people hearing about this idea of Economic Opportunities Commission, this seems a little beyond their scope, taking a 12-year-old without their parents' permission or consent to go have reproductive health services without the parents, not knowing. And I learned a little bit about this clinic that they are taking these young people to. So here's the full list of services that this clinic does. Now, I'll say at the start, they don't actually do surgical abortions, and to best of my knowledge, it doesn't seem like they do chemical abortions either. But let me go through the list of services they provide at this clinic, which is in downtown Fresno. Again, this is the clinic from the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, which Fresno Unified apparently has an agreement with so that people from the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission will drive students during school hours at the student's request with no notification to the parents for them to access reproductive health services. Let me go through the things that they can get at this clinic at, I believe they said, Tulare and R Streets. Here are the services they can get. A pregnancy test, contraception or birth control. I'm going to save the most alarming two for last. Pregnancy tests, contraception or birth control, HIV/AIDS test, sexually transmitted infection/disease test, sexually transmitted infection treatment, sexually transmitted infection, birth control, and pregnancy counseling. Wonder what's happening there. Infection checks, reproductive health physicals, and here are the two biggies. Emergency contraception, Plan B, and, quote, offer referrals for other services. Other reproductive health services. So, what are they talking about? I think any of you out there with a brain in your head know what some of those other services are. Those other services are abortion. So, Fresno Unified has a program set up where they have someone from the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, which, why an Economic Opportunities Commission? What they are doing, taking kids to a reproductive health clinic without their parents knowing. Or let me tell you something about economic opportunity. Having your parents who maybe know a little bit more about your medical history than you do when you're 12 years old, maybe having your parents involved in a drastic moral decision, in a drastic healthcare decision, this is pretty serious medication we're talking about, prescription medication we're talking about. Because we're not just talking about, birth control. We're not just talking about condoms here, okay? We're talking about all these different kinds of hormonal birth control. We're talking about Plan B. These are things that can have a long-term health impact on a 12-year-old girl who is taking them, particularly if she's taking them repeatedly over the course of her fertile years, taking them with no guidance, no knowledge of her parents. We're going to dig into this more after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. You better think about what's happening at Fresno Unified. We have this story from the Fresno Bee about the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission and their little program that maybe you didn't know about to drive your kid in Fresno Unified, your 12-year-old kid from Fresno Unified, to their reproductive health clinic, which is located at Tulare and R Street, to get various reproductive health services, totally confidential for your student, so that you never have to know about it. Now, I want to go through this list of things that this clinic offers to students. Again, this is students during school hours, on school time, being driven from school without their parents knowing, with kids still being reported as present at school, being driven off campus to a health appointment at a clinic in downtown Fresno, run by the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, with Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission drivers driving them there. Let me go through again some of the services they're providing. Contraception and birth control, emergency contraception, and, quote, offer referrals for other services. That's from the website of the Fresno Economic Opportunity Commission. These are the kinds of services their clinic is providing. Now, let's gloss over the offer referrals for other services because we know what that is. That means abortion. They are offering referrals to other clinics that provide abortion. It does not say that, but I'm making a pretty safe guess here, I think. Okay, I should clarify. I don't want to get sued by them. Okay, I don't know this for a fact, but it would really surprise me if they're not. So let's look at the services they actually do offer. Emergency contraception, Plan B. Now, emergency contraception or Plan B is a tricky topic. This is a medication that you take within the first 72 hours after sexual activity. And there's a lot of kind of conflicting information about what its effect is. Is it abortifacient or is it actually contraceptive? Does it prevent contraception? Now, I read a really good article on this from the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Charlotte Lozier Institute is great. For anyone who wants to learn more about the pro-life cause, Charlotte Lozier Institute does great research, really scientifically rigorous. It's basically a think tank for the pro-life movement. It's something we really need. It's basically the response to the Guttmacher Institute, which is a think tank that was actually officially part of Planned Parenthood and is now sort of a separate entity. Unfortunately, the Guttmacher Institute, which is literally named after a former Planned Parenthood president, the Guttmacher Institute gets cited in mainstream media publications as if it's this totally unbiased, totally neutral, authoritative, word on the subject. Whereas if the Charlotte Lozier Institute issues a policy paper, it's from the anti-abortion think tank, Charlotte Lozier Institute. Guttmacher Institute is just the Guttmacher Institute. So, Charlotte Lozier Institute has this really good article on Plan B. This is from 2013, written by Teresa Donovan. The Food and Drug Administration announced on April 30th it has approved a drug maker's application to make Plan B one-step available over the counter without a prescription to girls age 15 and over. This decision marks a retreat from the previous policy endorsed by senior Obama administration officials and President Obama himself to continue requiring minor children under the age of 17 to obtain a prescription for this controversial medication. Basically, this story goes over not only whether this is abortifacient versus contraceptive, and its conclusion is in most cases it is contraceptive, but in some cases it is in fact abortifacient. But one of the other things it talks about is the health impact of Plan B, that girls are using this as like the backup plan, if they ever happen to have sex with a guy without a condom or when they've missed their birth control, this is the backup plan. Well, this is a very significant dosage of hormones that's being delivered in a very rapid time frame. So there are all now this article has a lot of really technical scientific language. But let me try to get you. Here's the paragraph that I think that gets to the core of this problem, particularly as we're talking about it in the context of Fresno Unified, allowing kids to be driven to a clinic run by the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission that is providing kids with Plan B, with potentially abortifacient contraception. Here is the key paragraph. Few, if any, young women who rush to purchase Plan B or Preven, etc., from their local pharmacy within 72 hours of, quote, unprotected sex are thinking about the systemic effects of such drugs. These young women are not thinking about their hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, their brain, bloodstream, and bodily ecosystem, nor are they thinking about potential long-term effects of exposure to hormonally active compounds. Instead, these young women are likely not to be thinking critically at all, certainly not about the long term. Fearful, if not panic-stricken, they are being exploited for financial profit, all while being exposed to well-documented risks of infectious disease and emotional and psychological harm associated with non-marital sexual activity. And this is the core of this problem, right? This is the core of the problem of Fresno Unified. And look, I recognize that some of what Fresno Unified is doing is just complying with California state law. Like, I realize the chief problem here is not so much with Fresno Unified, it's with the state of California. I would say that there were probably some mistakes made by local school districts not raising a big enough stink about these policies when they were initially drafted and passed by the California legislature years and years and years ago. Certainly, local school boards in the San Joaquin Valley didn't do jack crap to fix to raise a stink against things like, the California Healthy Youth Act, which requires, abortion education. Well, why do people in Clovis, what's going on with our Clovis Unified School Board, where in Clovis Unified, this very heavily conservative district with so many people who are pro-life, we elect these people to the Clovis Unified School Board. They don't make a peep about the California Healthy Youth Act when it's introduced, which has all this horrible abortion-related stuff. I mean, that is, I think a lot of the people who were on the board at that time, and some of them are still on, but the idea that our school boards, even conservative school boards, just seem to roll over and take whatever the teachers' unions and the Democratic Party in the state legislature, they just seem to roll over and take whatever, quote, the experts tell them to take, which I just find to be outrageous. Like, what are we doing? Why are we electing you? I mean, there's this notion in Clovis of, the specialness of Clovis Unified when, all right, this is turning into a different sort of rant. But anyway, in short, the dangers associated with Plan B, and it's not just with Plan B, okay? There are all kinds of hormonal health problems associated with the pill, with intrauterine devices. I mean, so many really serious health outcomes associated with that. And let me just ask you all this. Do you think would you trust your 12-year-old to make a health decision on his or her own about something like that? Do you really trust your 12-year-old to do that? I don't know that I would have trusted me at age 16 to make that decision, or 18 to make that decision, practically. And yet, California law and Fresno Unified has this whole program set up with Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission to drive kids away from school during school hours, for them to have confidential appointments kept secret from the parents, for them to get Plan B, emergency contraception, all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk more about the basics of California law as it relates to minors and parental consent and notification right after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. This is Sam Cooke on Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. RTLCC.org is the place to be. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/RightToLifeCA, or just search for Right to Life of Central California on Facebook and Twitter. You'll find us. We're the first thing that pops up. You can see our new, shiny, awesome website, rtlcc.org. It looks great. I'm really excited about it. Also, our Christmas dinner and auction is coming up. We're starting to have our ladies meeting to get things organized for it. So if you're interested in supporting Right to Life of Central California, if you like this radio show and you want to support the organization that makes it possible, support our work, I'd really encourage you to get in touch with us at Right to Life of Central California. Sponsor our big Christmas dinner and auction, Friday, December 6th. You can have your business advertise in our program. You can give us a sponsorship, buy some tables, come to the auction itself, buy some items, go crazy, bid on a live auction item or two. If you want to support the pro-life message, if it's really something that you believe in, Right to Life of Central California is a great entity to support. It's a great way to put your money where your political mouth is and really support a great organization that's doing a lot of good work. If you like this radio show, help us to keep it on the air. So rtlcc.org is the place to go. We have the donate button right there. And get in touch with us, 559-229-2229. That's 229-BABY. During the week, if you would like to sponsor the Christmas dinner and auction. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Fresno Johnny. If you want to learn about all of my radio doings and all of my thoughts and opinions on all manner of things. So we're talking about this story from the Fresno Bee about the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission and their clinic, which provides first free rides for students from Fresno Unified Schools to their clinic, confidential rides and confidential reproductive health care visits where the students don't have to tell their parents, don't have to let their parents know, and they have to keep it secret from the parents. The clinic has to keep it secret from the parents. And at this clinic, students can access birth control. I don't know all the kinds of birth control they can access, but presumably, IUDs are pretty common, are becoming more and more common now. Hormonal contraception, etc. And then Plan B is available at this clinic. So also potentially very deleterious to long-term hormonal health. and referrals for, quote, other services. And while I haven't confirmed this, I would be shocked if those other services do not include medication abortions and maybe even surgical abortions. Now, I want to talk a little bit more broadly about this situation in California, because it's one of the first things that people ask me. Like, there's still so many people in California shocked at the notion that a minor can get an abortion without their parents knowing about it. And let's just note, the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission, they're just the ones who have this set up with Fresno Unified where they will drive students for free for these checkups. Students themselves can set up their own appointments without someone driving them. They can set up their own appointments to go have an abortion without their parents ever knowing. Like, that can still happen. Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission may not necessarily drive them directly to get an abortion, but a 12-year-old can still get an abortion in this state without their parents knowing on school time. The school is obligated not to tell the parents if the student leaves the school for an abortion appointment, for a reproductive health appointment, and reproductive health includes abortion. Why is that? How is this the case? So the reason why it is these long-standing aspects of California law that predate the legalization of abortion. Basically, there are certain areas where minors don't need parental permission for health care. Generally speaking, minors are deemed to be too young to consent to medical treatment. Okay, this is one of the various ways in which the law sort of protects minors, protects their youth and inexperience and lack of knowledge by not allowing them to sign up for certain things. Most minors are not able to sign most contracts in California. Most of the time, minors need their parents to sign for them. For most healthcare treatments, minors can't consent to them. There are a couple of carve-outs in California law that have existed for a long time that are exceptions to that rule. If you're a minor in California and you are married, you don't need your parents' permission for healthcare treatment. If you are a minor in California and you are serving in the U.S. military, you don't need your parents' permission for healthcare treatment. All right, if you're a 17-year-old, you're stationed at the Marine Corps base, at one of the Marine Corps bases in San Diego or whatever, you don't need your parents' permission, if you fall and break your arm and you need an operation. The one other carve-out like this is reproductive health. Now, in an era before the legalization of abortion, I think there was maybe some greater wisdom to this. I think there was more of a fear of an overly conservative reaction from parents resulting in abuse to the child. And this came about in an era that's sort of pre-contraception and pre the pill and pre-legalized abortion. It was a different environment. But that carve out to the law did not change when abortion became legal. And abortion came under this heading of reproductive health. And so automatically, when abortion became legalized in California, and then after Roe v. Wade, minors could completely shut their parents out from the entire abortion discussion. Now, a change came about in many states' laws in the United States after 1992. In 1992, the Supreme Court issued its decision, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which is basically the successor of Roe v. Wade. It really sort of replaced Roe v. Wade's rationale for legalized abortion with a different rationale, a different sort of legal framework. Now, Planned Parenthood versus Casey was enormously disappointing for pro-lifers because it maintained the basic structure of Roe, that abortion essentially has to be legal for all 9 months of pregnancy and for any reason. What Casey did that was positive, though, was a couple of things. It allowed states to issue more informed consent requirements before an abortion. So there's some states where you have to offer someone an ultrasound before they can have an abortion. That's part of informed consent. There are some states that require 24-hour waiting periods before an abortion. There are some states that do all kinds of things. One of the things that states are allowed to do, and Planned Parenthood versus Casey very explicitly allowed this, states are allowed to pass laws requiring that parents either be notified or that they consent before a minor receives an abortion. And there are a number of states that have passed this, and it has resulted in their abortion rates dropping discernibly. Because if a parent is involved, maybe a child won't make a kind of desperate decision that's geared towards short-term results as opposed to long-term outcomes. The regret of aborting a child, the health risks associated with abortion, all of these different things that minors are not good at assessing. It's why minors, for the most part, are not trusted with making healthcare decisions by the state. Yet, in this whole region of health, this whole area of health involving what kinds of hormonal contraceptions to take or not take, hormonal contraceptions that in some cases are abortifacient, maybe in some cases they aren't, but in all cases could have long-term healthcare impacts for young people who may not understand their whole medical history, what kinds of medications they are allergic to, etc. You have this ridiculous situation where we've just said, no, parents, you're shut out of this. This is solely up to the decision of a 13-year-old who is too young to vote, who is too young to volunteer for the Army, who is too young to be trusted to sign any contracts, who's too young to even consent to sex. This 13-year-old, too young to consent to sex, is allowed to make all of the decisions for herself about what to do about this outcome of sex, completely independently of their parents' judgment, knowledge, expertise, love, care, concern. That is the situation with the law in California surrounding children and their ability to make decisions about reproductive care. We'll be back for our closing thoughts right here on Right to Life Radio. Otis Redding with us today on Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. You know, I'm getting confused between the formats for Right to Life Radio versus the John Girardi Show, so I thought this segment had 5 minutes left. No, I got 10 minutes left, so we're instead of just doing closing thoughts on the Fresno Economic Opportunity Commission story and their whole program of driving kids to their reproductive health clinic in downtown Fresno without their parents knowing and giving them Plan B, abortifacient contraception, I'm going to talk about a different story for this closing segment. So this is a story coming out of Missouri. Missouri passed a law that was backed by 82% of Missouri voters to impose limits on late-term abortions. So Missouri passed a law called the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act, which was banning late-term abortions, banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, and I think actually it may have even banned it at earlier points in pregnancy. And this law was immediately challenged in the federal courts. It was immediately challenged in the federal courts, and it was overturned by the federal court that heard it in Missouri. The federal judge's order temporarily blocks parts of it as litigation continues. Now, this was passed by the state legislature in Missouri. 82% of Missouri voters, including 66% of Democrats. This is from the press release written by the Susan B. Anthony list, which is a lot of their information is really, really good on pro-life stuff. They're a bit more partisan than Right to Life of Central California is. They're different. They're not a nonprofit. They directly help assist with the election of different politicians. So we're not endorsing them, we're not jeopardizing our 501c3 status, but they have a lot of interesting information. Polling released by SBA List found that 82% of Missouri voters, including 66% of Democrats in Missouri, 83% of independents, 83% of women, and 61% of self-described pro-choice voters support a law prohibiting late-term abortions. And only 18% of Missourians support a law allowing late-term abortions. The law that they passed, this Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act, contained some of the nation's strongest protections for unborn children and their mothers, including provisions protecting unborn children from abortion at 8 weeks of pregnancy and later. Okay, so this was a ban on abortion from 8 weeks and later. Limiting late-term abortions after 5 months of pregnancy, when science shows that unborn children can feel pain, declaring the state of Missouri and all its political subdivisions a sanctuary of life, banning discriminatory abortions for reason of sex, race, or Down syndrome, requiring abortionists to have adequate malpractice insurance, and more. So why does this get overturned? I mean, here's the state legislature reflecting the will of its people, passing a law to regulate abortion in a way that is not crazy, all right? There are nations in Europe that have all kinds of abortion restrictions that would make American pro-choice activists blush and act as though, it's the end of the women's movement as we know it. Countries like France and Germany ban abortions at 12 weeks of pregnancy or 20 weeks of pregnancy. Some of them require you to go through counseling first before you even have an abortion in the first place. Europe is so much more restrictive of abortion than the United States is. Like, it's not even close. I mean, you propose even the most modest restriction on abortion in the United States, and Planned Parenthood, NARAL, etc., will freak out as if you are literally will make comparisons that you are trying to, turn women into an oppressive, forced Amish society. The stupid. I mean, I've never seen an episode of it, but I hate it more than literally anything. This stupid television program called The Midwife's Tale, which is apparently the only literature regarding the topic of abortion that any pro-choice person has ever seen. And so they assume that, a law prohibiting abortions, after 20 weeks of pregnancy, when you've got a kid who's banning abortions after maybe, let's say, 23 weeks of pregnancy, when a child is viable, when a child can actually survive outside the womb, they act as though you're trying to put women into these restrictive, Christian, oppressive communes and force them all to be just gestational machines. It's absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, here's Missouri. Sorry for that little rant there. Here's Missouri that passes this law banning abortions from 8 weeks of pregnancy onward. And let's remember, at 8 weeks of pregnancy, kids got heartbeat, brain activity, arms, legs, hands, feet. This is a small version of you. Let's expand our moral imaginations and understand you were like this. This person is not other. This person is not a clump of cells. This person is not an abstraction. This person is not a missing period, which is a euphemism that is really gross that I've been hearing more from the pro-choice side. No, this is a human being. This is a living human organism. This is a member of our species, with the limitless potential that every single human life has, whom you are snuffing out before he has a chance to be born. Here's Missouri saying, we want to ban abortions after this point. This is what our people desire. This is what we believe to be true. This is what we're going to do. And this federal judge, whether he or she wanted to or not, says the Supreme Court precedent of Planned Parenthood versus Casey requires that I strike this down. Why? Why does the Supreme Court precedent require you to strike it down? Because Planned Parenthood versus Casey purports to read into the text of the Constitution a document written in the late 18th century, which has no mention of abortion, which has no mention of healthcare services, which has no mention of the privacy that should be respected around individual intimate choices, and the privacy that should be respected against states and their ability to regulate healthcare. States which have broad latitude to regulate healthcare and healthcare choices and healthcare interactions and all kinds of things like that, which we have always respected in our constitutional law in this country, that states have broad latitude to regulate healthcare. But no, somehow Planned Parenthood versus Casey and Roe v. Wade before it discerns in the text of the Constitution a right of individuals to define the very nature of existence, of meaning, and of the mystery of human life, as Anthony Kennedy wrote in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. That's pretty much a quote from him. The mystery of human life is something that everyone can define for themselves. and the mystery of whether and when human life has begun for an individual member of our species, and whether and when that person has value. That is, according to Justice Kennedy, such an important question that the government should be totally neutral about it. That the government should totally step back and just let individuals decide and allow a marketplace to flourish around those persons who decide that they want to end the life of that human organism, with very little oversight possible from state governments. So because Justice Kennedy and Sandra Day O'Connor and David Souter, who are the people who upheld the controlling opinion in Planned Parenthood versus Casey for so long, because that's what they discerned to be mystically, magically hidden in the text of the Constitution, states can't do things like Missouri tried to do. And that's why I'm so glad, I'm so glad and I'm so looking forward to and so nervous about and so anticipating the possibility that this Supreme Court, that the Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts Supreme Court, will revisit Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey and get us to a point of much greater sanity where, at the very least, we could get to a point where we acknowledge that the Constitution doesn't have much to say about abortion. And at the very least, states should be allowed to enact reasonable abortion restrictions like the one Missouri did. I mean, I'd go a step further and say maybe the Constitution completely protects the right to life of an innocent person from conception onward, but, let's take baby steps here. All right, well, that's going to do it for us as we're played out by the Godfather theme. Thank you so much for listening to Right to Life Radio. We'll see you next week.